3 Golden Eagles for War Thunder. Link in the description. Hello you sexy beasts, welcome back to War Thunder. This is the T-10M, the Soviet answer to pretty much everything. This is the top tier heavy tank, sitting at a battle rating of 8.0, down the IS-2, the IS-3 and the IS-4 line. This tank features a 122mm gun, which can carry a total of 30 rounds inside of the tank. It also features 2 machine guns. 2 14.5mm machine guns. These are actually quite big. One mounted coaxially to the gun and one mounted on top of the tank. To note is the penetration of these machine guns. Whilst they can only fire in quite short bursts, they have up to 45mm of penetration, which can be used against lightly armored targets quite effectively actually. The gun can actually carry a variety of ammo choices. As one of the only top tier tanks, it gets access to an APDS type, in the form of this APCBC shell, which has between 282 to 246mm of penetration at up to 1 km distance, has 950mm per second muzzle velocity and 204 grams of explosive filler. The shell is of course completely free since it's a stock shell, and it's the shell that you should be carrying the most. Stock, you also get access to the HE shell, and there's not much to be told about it. It's a 122mm HE shell, it has 38mm of penetration at any distance, any angle, anything, and has a 865m per second muzzle velocity. It is quite effective if employed against very lightly armored targets or the bottom of tanks, but for the most case you don't need to worry too much about this, since the fusillade on the APDS shell is actually quite low, with having a fuse sensitivity of only 15mm. The first shell you can unlock is this APDS shell, which is quite probably the fastest shell in War Thunder. This shell can penetrate anywhere between 339 to 331mm at up to 1 km distance, and has 1620 meters per second muzzle velocity. This shell is absolutely awesome for sniping targets at long range. However, it comes with a big price. At 1000 civilians per shot, you can't afford to shoot too many of these. This is actually really quite expensive, one of the most expensive APDS shells in the game. And finally, the last shell you can unlock is the HEATFS shell, which has 400mm of penetration at any range. This shell travels up to 920mm per second, and as such the slowest HEATFS shell at this tier, if I'm not mistaken. It is a very comparable muzzle velocity to the APDS shell, which means that once you are used to the muzzle drop of the gun drop, bullet drop of the APDS shell, you should have no problem using the HEATFS shell. However, since it is quite a bit slower than the HEATFS shell, for example, on the Leopard, it is much harder to use at longer ranges. On top of that, it is also the most expensive HEATFS shell, sitting at 1,300 silver lines per shot. Yeah, you can't really afford to shoot too many of these. As for the gun handling, it's a bit weird. Now, the horizontal traverse is anywhere between 11.9 to 17 degrees per second, depending on your crew and your modifications. It isn't the worst around, but it could be better. It is decent, it is mediocre in terms of horizontal turret traverse. The vertical traverse is actually extremely good, between 24.9 and 35 degrees per second. This is one of the tanks that doesn't really suffer from that feature, let's say, the game feature when you go around a corner and your gun is just pointing up. This thing just gets up and down very quickly. However, the vertical traverse is very bad, having between only -4 and 15 degrees. Yeah, this thing cannot crest hills. Not even the slightest hill, your gun will not go down. And even up, you're going to have problems pointing the gun up into the sky. The reload of the 122mm gun is one of its biggest weak points, having anywhere between 20 and 15.4 seconds. This is about double the reload time of stuff like the Chieftain Mark III and the Leopard and the M60, which is a major problem when we go into battle, but we're going to see that in the gameplay in a bit. As for the armor, the turret cheeks are extremely thick, having anywhere between 300 to 400 millimeters of armor. The gun mantle itself has still the 250mm turret cheek just below it, and another 100mm plate on top, making for a total of about 350mm of armor. The turret of this thing is pretty much impenetrable by anything that isn't the Chieftain Mark III's APDS shell or HEATFS shells. And even HEATFS shells are going to have trouble punching through this thing depending on the angle. However, there is a weak spot on the turret, which is this optic just to the right side of the gun, which depending on the angle you hit it at can reduce the armor of down to 240 or 250mm of penetration. However, you have to hit it very accurately, as if you go just a little bit above it, the armor suddenly jumps up to 300mm. The hull is another story. Now, the upper glacis is extremely angled and has anywhere between 250 to 300mm of armor. However, the driver's hatch and the very, let's immediately say, the very small turret ring are rather weak. The turret ring itself has 40mm of armor and the driver's hatch has up to 160. This is the weak spot. You want to show that you want to show that if the lower glacis is covered. As for the lower glacis, as you can see, it is a massive weak spot, having anywhere between 210 and 220mm of effective armor. This is where you want to shoot at the T-10M if he is exposing his lower plate. From the side, the T-10M is actually quite well armored. Due to the angling, this upper strip here has anywhere between 170 to 190mm of armor. Just above the tracks is also very angled and has around 190mm of armor. Below the tracks is another story, having just about 70 to 80mm of armor. The turret side, depending on where you hit it, has also 150 to 300mm of armor. If you face a T-10M from the side, you should shoot just below the tracks here. From the back, the turret has between 102 to 260mm of armor, easily punchable through, and the back of the hull has 70 to 80mm of armor. Now the T-10M is an extremely mobile heavy tank. It can reach up to 50 km per hour, has only 50-ton mass, and a 750 horsepower engine in my current configuration, which gives it a horsepower per ton power to weight ratio of 15. This is like medium tanks level. This thing can get around. Now, the hull traverse isn't the best around, it could be a little bit better, but the acceleration is extremely good. This thing gets up to speed very fast. However, as you can see, this tank is made out of ammo racks. Anything that punches through your armor is going to most likely kill you in one shot. Alright, this is the garage review of the T-10M done. Let's head into the gameplay. Going into the testing of the T-10M, I did the same thing that I did with the M60. First, I tried to get out with the stock shells, the APCBC shells. Then after that, I tried playing only the APDS shells and the HEATFS shells. Now, the stock shell of the T-10M is an APHE type, and whilst it has one of the best penetrations for APHE type shells, having up to, if I'm not mistaken, let me quickly check. Yes, the APCBC shell has up to 282mm of penetration at close ranges, which is extremely good. That is extremely good. The muzzle velocity is also very respectable, having 950 meters per second. However, there's one big problem with this APHE shell, which is the explosive filler. For a 122mm shell, it carries surprisingly little explosive filler, only having 204 grams. Now to put this into comparison, the stock IS-2 shells get 270 grams of high explosive filler. The King Tiger's 105mm shells get 340 grams of TNT. And the Mouse shell, which is a 128mm gun, has 780 grams of explosive filler. As you can see, it carries very little, which is a problem when you're trying to go for one-shot kills. The thing I noticed the most in my playtime with the T-10M is the lack of one-shot kills. And that is a big problem given the long reload time of, in my configuration, 15 seconds, but which can go up to 20 seconds when you're driving this thing completely stuck. Now in the gameplay on Tunisia, I was the only one of my team to go to the top left side of this map, expecting the enemy German team to come through here. That's normally what they do. They go over the bridge, rush with the Leopards and try to get us from the side. Interestingly, in this gameplay there was no one coming for me, which I found weird. I was very nervous because the Leopard is pretty much the nemesis of the T-10M. And here's why. The Leopard gets a 105mm gun, which has also access to APDS shells and HEATFS shells. Now the APDS shell is more than enough to punch through the lower plate, and even the upper plate in some cases. Not quite enough to punch through the turret. Your turret's pretty much invulnerable to the stock shell of the Leopard I. The HEATFS shell, however, can punch through you anywhere, anytime. Except for maybe the turret, depending on the situation, but even that can be punched through. However, most of the Leopard drivers are smart enough to go for the hull of this tank, and that's where most of your ammo racks are. Now, if you do get the first shot off, you do have the slight advantage, but there is a problem. Actually, let me show you a clip right here.
Attack the C point.
So as you can see, I did get the first shot off against a Leopard, but in the time it took me to reload and reposition, the guy got his gunner back up and just killed me in one shot. Which is weird because it's a 105mm gun and you have a 122mm gun. This gun just doesn't do many one-shots, neither with the APCBC shell, neither with the APDS shell, neither with the HEATFS shell. That being said, since this flank is completely open, I decided to put myself into an ambush position. Since the tanks aren't here, they must be more towards the middle of the map. And given the right circumstances and given that you hit the right spot, you can still get one-shot kills with this gun. But it seems to be very unreliable. And I really can't stress this point enough. The shells are not the most reliable. Even the APHE shell is not guaranteed to be a one-shot kill. And that is a huge problem when you have such a long reload time. Essentially, if you don't put your shot exactly in the right spot and you don't get a one-shot kill, the enemy will have plenty of time to either get his gunner back up or to even repair and shoot back at you. And shooting back at you with HEATFS shells is going to blow you up in a single shot most of the time. Now finally we did spot a Leopard that was sneaking up behind us, and as you can see, the 122mm APHE shell just did not one-shot that Leopard. We did do a nice amount of damage, and I was afraid that this guy would pull up behind cover, repair, and then just pretty much obliterate me, because I couldn't do anything if he did that. But thankfully he did pretty much put himself out in the open, not being able to spot me. If that Leopard had been smart and taken cover to repair, I would have been dead, because here's the thing. If I waited, he probably would have gotten the first shot off again, even though I knew more or less his position, because Leopard is a very stealthy little tank and it's kind of hard to get shots into that thing. It could have also bounced my APHE shell that I had loaded at the time, and given the HEATFS shells that the thing carries, it would have probably just one-shot me anyways. Now I took a little shot from the side there, and this is an example of an extremely good mouse driver. Take note, all the mouse drivers out there, take note of what this guy is doing. Notice how he's angling his turret to the left and his hull to the right side. Essentially what he's trying to do here is shield his gunner. Thankfully the APHE shell does have enough penetrative power to go for the turret cheek even when it's angled like that. He could have angled a little bit more and I would have bounced, but like that it had no problem going straight through and killing most of the turret crew. But as you can see, it doesn't have enough explosive power to kill the entire crew. The driver and radio operator will still up, which means that the guy is now down to 2 drivers. Switching to my HEATFS shell, trying to go through the heavy thick armor that the thing has. The HEATFS shell is, as I mentioned in the M60 video, it isn't quite as powerful as it used to be. Especially the cannon breech of the mouse, since it's so big and so massive, it tends to just catch every single fragment that the HEATFS shell causes. And most often than not, you do pretty much no damage whatsoever with the HEATFS shell. That was actually a good shot. Using the rangefinder to find the range of the Leopard I. Actually, I've seen a lot of people in my comment section asking me how to use the rangefinder, and no, it is not a mod. It's actually a feature of the game, which isn't very well explained. Now, in order to use the rangefinders, you can use it on any tank. Even tier 1 tanks, they also have rangefinders. All you have to do is go to controls, tank controls, and right at the bottom of the list, there's the rangefinder. You only have to set it to a key, point at something, press the key, and it's going to indicate the range to your target, which is extremely useful when going for tanks RB. And as you can see, that Leopard just obliterated me. That's really, it's really the problem with the T-10M. Now, here's the fun thing: the T-10M, when it first was released, was a hands down completely overpowered tank. This thing would wreck everything. Since back when this thing was introduced, it was one of the first tanks that actually got a 400mm HEATFS shell, which means that it would beat Mouses all day long. There was no Leopard in the game yet. The tanks it would face mostly had just APDS shells or APCR shells. Saber shells weren't all that common, and it would just bounce everything and it would just kill everything in one shot, and it had an awesome mobility for a heavy tank. This thing was completely overpowered. Since then, a lot has changed. The introduction of the Leopard, the introduction of the M60, both of these tanks have HEATFS shells. The introduction of the British tech tree now with their top tier tanks having extremely high penetration APDS shells and extremely good fire rates. This tank went from being the absolute hero to being kind of a zero. Now, the T-10M is still competitive if you stick together with your teammates. That's the biggest tip I can give you when driving this tank. Just stick to your teammates. The reload rate is your downfall if you're caught pants down with your pants down and all alone. A lonely T-10M is a dead T-10M. So it's always a good idea to try and squad up with some people or try to follow your team. Other than that, you're going to have massive problems, and this is a good segment coming up here. By the way, this is pretty much all the kills we got. In the, I think it was 10 games that I tried to get footage for the T-10M, even more, this was the best game I had, 4 kills. And it's all down to the slow reload rate and the rather unreliable APDS shell. There's a Leopard over there, and here's the problem. I can't really get over this hill. If it wasn't something like an American tank or even another Leopard, I could probably take this guy out very easily, but look how far I have to get over the hill to get my gun down. Even now, I can't. And the problem is, if that guy so much as sees me, given that I have to crest over the hill and expose my lower plate, and all of my ammo racks are right there, that guy is guaranteed going to one-shot kill me before I even have a chance to point my gun down at him. And even when I point my gun down at him, I still have to figure out the range to that guy, since he's covered behind a rock and it's such a low-profile tank. I can't just afford to dump my shot hoping that I get lucky. Since the reload rate is so freaking long, that guy will just have all the time in the world to run away and reposition and kill me later. And after doing a little dance with this guy, he must have spotted me by now. He finally decided that, it's time to go away. I tried to take this opportunity to go forwards and try to get a shot at him. He's showing me his sights, but just as I'm about to range find, he takes cover. And that's the problem with T-10M. It's not a very reactive tank. Even though the vertical speed, the vertical acquisition speed is extremely good on the T-10M, your gun depression just lets you down too much. And this was the T-10M, the once shining star of the Red Army, now held back by its reload rate. Now, T-10M still has amazing armor, and when it gets down tiered, it can absolutely wreck and carry games. Especially given its mobility and the APDS shell, which, despite the lower explosive filler, is still more reliable in damaging a wider area than APDS or HEATFS shells. And the MGs, and of course the fastest APDS shell in the game. It has its advantages. However, there are also many disadvantages. The reload rate is what kills this tank. It is made out of ammo racks, which once you are penetrated, just kills you in a single shot most of the time. The shells cost a lot. 1000 silver lines for the APDS shell, 1300 silver lines for the HEATFS shell. You suffer from the heavy tank spawn syndrome, which means that you don't get many spawn points once you spawn into this thing, which can make it hard to get a second spawn in or trying to go for aircraft, which can make it even harder to carry games. And the APD shell of course has a low explosive filler and isn't very reliable. And the HEATFS shell is the slowest of its competitors. As for tips, if you want to drive the T-10M, drive in a pack. A wolf pack of T-10Ms is deadly, and so you can compensate the slow reloads of one another. A single T-10M by itself is just feasted on by Leopard Is. Anyways, this has been it for this video. You can now vote for the next vehicle on the top right corner. The next video is going to be on the ME262. Finally an aircraft request. I've been getting kind of sick of playing only tanks. And I will see you again on Tuesday. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like rating, subscribe if you're new around here, and as always, my name has been MikeGoesBoom. Thanks for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Or instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find a slightly better